Hello and welcome to the Geeks Review. I'm Royce.
I'm Jacob.
Star Trek is a series we've rarely touched upon in the Geeks Review. It's because I wasn't much a watcher of it, but now I finally am. I've caught up with the next generation, and Jacob, you and I were going to talk about it.
I'm so proud of you.
Our favourite episodes.
Favourite episodes or favourite moments, just things we love about the series.
Yes, so this came out in the mid-80s. It ran for 7 years and spawned 4 spin-off movies and, well, a spin-off TV show in the form of Picard, which, from what I've heard, isn't too good, but it's alright.
It's divisive.
Divisive, the diplomatic version of events.
Yeah.
But yes, this introduced us to the characters of Jean-Luc Picard and Data and Geordi LaForge.
William Riker, Deanna Troi, Wesley Crusher.
Beverly Crusher, Tasha Yar, briefly.
Beverly Crusher, my first Crusher.
Q.
Q.
Yes.
John Delancey.
Yes, fantastic he is. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the next generation, and yeah, how this, we're not going to be talking too much about the behind the scenes of it, because
there's a lot there. we want to focus on the actual TV series and what we love about this series. If we go behind the stage, there's a lot that happened behind the screen. That'd be its whole own thing to talk about, so we'll leave that for now.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was actually the first proper expansion of the Star Trek universe, because for the first 20 years it was just Kirk and Spock and
the funniest thing is people tend to forget the original Star Trek series was not very long at all.
No, not at all.
It was one season and 500 movies.
So Next Generation was had a bit of a rocky start, and it really picked up steam. And
yeah, season 1 of TNG, you can tell, was still trying to be the first generation. Riker was blatantly meant to be the new Kirk, clean-shaven horn dog, having significant moves and all that.
Yeah.
Data having a weirdly Pinocchio entry and all that. It's like, I'd like to be a human. Just apropos of nothing. It was very... You could tell they hadn't found their groove yet. And a lot of that was also stuff behind the scenes. The writer being a dickhead.
Many writers, producers, actors leaving the show because they weren't happy with how they were being treated.
Which is fair enough, because they were being treated poorly.
Yeah.
Natasha Yar being killed off because she disagreed with the fact she was getting paid peanuts.
Well, yeah, being given very little to act with.
Yeah, and given very little to a role, being paid like shit. What I appreciate, though, is everyone came together behind her. They supported her. Like, the entire cast was like, yeah, no, she's right. You guys suck. She got killed off the show, which was... But then the whole crew came together and got the writers and producers that caused this booted off the show. And lo and behold, season 2 and onwards, much better.
You do have a few icky episodes, like a lot of non-consensual stuff, usually to do with the character of Troy, played by Marina Sirtis.
Yeah, it's always uncomfortable. And you could tell that was some weird bleeding in from must be one of the writers producers, because no one involved looked like they're enjoying doing it.
It does tackle a wide range of topics, though, and it's all allegorical to, well, real topics, real issues.
And most of it is tastefully handled.
Mostly.
A lot of the best stuff comes when a lot of the actors got to start writing episodes. For particular, Jonathan Frakes, Will Riker, ended up writing a lot of the episodes, and all the episodes are fantastic.
He directed a lot of as well.
Yeah,
Patrick Stewart did some.
Yeah, the man is a fantastic writer and director. And one of my biggest goddamn crushes in the world. He was also in Gargoyles.
Oh, was he?
He was the villain, the businessman villain.
Oh, right.
He is the man who coined... how does the quote go? Pay a man enough and he'll walk barefoot into hell. And I love that, because the whole point of this villain was that he was just rich.
Yes.
I was like, that is such a good line. He had a lot of good lines. But we're not here to talk about gargoyles, so I'm going to get off my tangent and go back to TNG.
Yes.
Fantastic series.
Who's your favourite character?
Riker.
Yes.
I love Riker. I recognise a lot of his... Especially after we got past the first season and he was less about being a horn dog. The first season, I wasn't a massive fan of him because he was just the horn dog. He was just the Kirk stand-in. Once he got to come into his own and grew his beard, he really just became one of my favourite characters. And Data. I love Data.
I think they wanted to treat Riker like he was the Kirk, but even then with... it was the episode where the gender norms were switched. So you had, like... The females were the dominant gender on the planet and the males. And it was interesting, you sort of had more... butch female actresses and sort of more effeminate males. And they sort of chuck Riker into that and try to make it seem like he is Kirk, but he's a bit more complex than Kirk was.
He has a lot more complexity, and he also has a lot more respect for women than Kirk. Like, except for a few weirdly written episodes, every time they portrayed like Riker having interrelations with an alien species, it always feels equal. It always feels like he respects his partner. He's not just viewing her as a sex object.
Well, in saying that, brought to mind an episode I do know the title of. A lot of the TNG episodes are kind of titled weirdly. Like, you don't... You just say it and you're like, which was that one? Oh, it's the one where this happens. Oh, right, yes, I remember that now. But First Contact, where Riker is down as a scout on an alien planet that's on the brink of developing warp drive. So, within the Star Trek universe, you have the Federation of Planets, which is, well, a federation of planets. Planets who all harmoniously get along together and progress, space exploration
For the most part.
Community across the stars.
Yeah, there's still politics involved, so shit goes wrong, but
Basically, when they travel out among the stars, they have the Prime Directive, which is basically to say, don't interfere with a culture or a society that is still developing.
And then proceed to break the Prime Directive every chance.
It's kind of a reference to like colonialism, where you would have, European ships would sail up to a tropical country and completely wipe out the population.
Yeah.
Or, put them on a path to destruction. So, anytime a planet is on the verge of creating a warp drive, which would allow faster than light travel and would basically send them rocketing out into the stars, the Federation shows up and basically introduces themselves and goes like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. We're here to introduce you. Yeah. So it's this planet that's on the brink of developing warp drive, and Riker has gone down in disguise as one of the aliens of this planet, and he gets hospitalized. And the doctors of the planet, who are kind of like technology-wise similar to Earth is about now, realise that Riker is not of their world.
Yeah, physiologically different to them.
And you do have a nurse who I think is played by... who was Frasier's wife in Cheers?
Oh, God, I know you're talking about, though.
Yeah, it was her. It was that actress. And she is a alien xenophile.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Riker has to do the deed with her if he wants to escape the hospital, which is kind of a...
Which is a bait and switch of the whole... Usually it's him seducing them to help. She's like, no, man, you were doing this.
It's kind of like the inverse of Garrus.
But would that be coercion?
It is. It
is coercion, which is kind of icky. I mean, obviously he didn't mind, which is good. I don't like seeing any kind of non-consensual in anything. I don't... It's like when you see it in horror, like I said, anything, it's like, oh, it's for the story. No, the story does not need it. This does not in any way improve the story. You do not need this. It is just gross and wrong. And yeah, it happens in real life, and it shouldn't. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of subversion of tropes in this. Another one I quite liked was... I will say, by today's standards, it was still a bit clunky, but for the time, it was surprisingly well handled. It was basically, he went to the non-binary planet. He goes on a planet where basically everyone's non-binary at that point. And he has a kind of a flirtatious romance with one of the citizens of the planet.
That's right, yeah.
And not once is the person shamed for not having a particular gender. Not once does Riker treat them as gross or wrong or weird.
It was played by a cisgendered actress.
It was.
But, I mean,
like I said,
they're aliens.
It would have been handled better these days, but at the time, it was surprisingly well handled.
That was, yeah, it was sort of, it was a strange one, because this was a culture who had done away with the concept of gender entirely, and as such, they were all sort of like a mixture of both. But if someone exhibited traits or a preference for a certain gender, they would... correct them, so it kind of became a discussion. That's right, it was a discussion of like conversion therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
LGBTQI.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
To kind of flip it on you and say, look, basically say it's wrong to force anything on anyone. This should be everyone's individual choice.
Unfortunately, the Prime Directive gets in the way there, where they couldn't interfere because it was that culture's ways, and it was like,
Yep, and they weren't allowed to interfere. And Riker has quite a cute little flirtatious relationship with this citizen, and it was quite sweet. And even though obviously this one was non-binary, there was no particular gender.
Oh yeah,
didn't turn Riker off, which confirms in my head that Riker is in fact a chaotic bisexual.
Yeah, well, you don't really get much of a discussion or anything like that in regards to LGBT issues in The Next Generation. I've been told you do see a bit of it in like later series and more recent series, but it is always sort of a present issue in some form or another.
Yeah, and they usually, rather than reference it directly, they always kind of reference it allegorically. Like in this episode, for instance. Which would be nice if they could be more blatant about it, but it was the 80s and things were very...
Well, I think actually with Tasha Yar, they actually paired her up with Data in episode 2 to...
That was weird.
prove that she wasn't gay, because I mean, masculine woman with short hair, and they just assumed she would be gay.
Yeah, tough woman, must like other women. And that whole thing was weird because everyone was under the influence of sex drugs, and that was, again, season 1 was, you could, honestly, if you ask me, you can just skip season 1.
That was a remake of like an original series episode, I think.
Yeah.
Naked. That's the one where Sulu's running around with his shirt off and a sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I'm hoping Data didn't realise what was going on, because at this point Data still does not.
That makes it worse.
It does. It really does. The whole thing was weird. Data doesn't understand what is going on because he's still trying to figure out what being a human is. Tasha Yar is under the influence of this weird sex drug. It's a bad episode. Don't watch it.
Talking about Riker, I like his anger as well. And there's the episode where he gets transported into the future and he just gets angry.
He's allowed to be a character. He is allowed to have... Most of the time in these things, the men in this... Like the women, they tend to be turned into one-dimensional characteristics. Like, the men have to always be strong and manly and macho. The women have to be kind of willowy and... In this one, no, everyone's got layers. Riker can be tender and sweet and, like, has... a surprisingly beautiful, bittersweet romance with a hologram, which I liked because you get to see this tender side of Riker, and like he gets to be emotional. Geordi gets to be emotional. You get to see a lot of Geordi's inner workings.
Geordi's a funny one because he's quite uncertain of himself early on, isn't he?
He has a lot of self-esteem issues, and I think a lot of that stems from his physical disability, his blindness, and the use of the visor, which we know hurts to use.
Well, I did read behind the scenes, it was actually quite painful for him to wear because it was like clamped onto his head, and he was functionally blind with it, which is funny because for the character it allows him to see, but it made the actor blind. And it was pointed out to me there's quite a few scenes where you see him like walking shoulder to shoulder with someone, and like, you know, to make sure he doesn't walk into a wall.
Which again is a nice touch, because what a lot of people with vision impairments would do.
It does seem to change a bit, because it's like in an early episode they plug into his visual receptors and they have like a display on the screen of what Geordi sees, and it's just a bunch of like infrared colours and all that.
Yeah.
And then later on there's the episode where the Enterprise's engines shut down and he calls upon the engineer of the engines to he like plugs them into the holodeck, and she's projected there as a hologram, and he starts to have feelings for her.
Yep, which is, again, this is the kind of parasocial relationship with his idealised version of this person. Which, don't. Parasocial, bad.
It's really funny later on when the actress returns playing the real character, and she's quite different to what he imagined her to be.
And then she sees it, she's creeped out, understandably.
Yeah, that was fun.
It's like, this is like, parasocial relationships are bad. Just because you do not know a person, just because you've seen their public persona. It's like on social media these days. Just because you follow this person on Twitter, just because you see how they act on Twitter, does not mean you know this person. A person on a public persona is very different to who they are in private. You can't know a person until you've actually had the chance to sit down and chat with them, get to know them. So our parasocial relationships are dangerous. So watch out for that trap. A lot of people fall into it. Do not fall into the trap of a parasocial relationship, because it can turn ugly very quickly.
Extremely.
And it makes these people you love and respect and like to watch, extremely uncomfortable. Don't do it. Just don't. Don't be fucking weird.
Agreed.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. And a lot of it's usually well handled. Surprisingly, for a lot of the series, one of the most one-dimensional characters is actually Picard. Because he's always portrayed as the gruff, serious captain. But even that gets broken down through certain episodes. Like one of the best ones where he gets sent mentally onto a planet.
Oh, yeah,
and he has an entire life.
Yeah, that's intense.
That's a good one. And
I believe it was his son, Patrick Stewart's son, playing the character's son.
Yeah.
In that.
And it was good. It was good. Patrick Stewart is just fantastic.
And that flute theme is just haunting.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been talking for way too long. What about you? What's some of your favourite moments? Favourite character? Who's your favourite?
Oh, Data's hard to...
Data is fantastic. Data is also my wife's favourite.
Yeah.
Adores him.
And how he's got his relationship with his pet cat called Spot, who doesn't have any spots. How he writes poetry and writes a poem for his cat. And
yeah, how he created his own daughter.
Yeah.
But he said, I'm going to let it choose their gender.
Yes, that another progressive idea.
Which unfortunately did end very sadly, in that she couldn't maintain her form. So this is season 1, so you could tell that it felt like Brent Spinner, the actor, wanted to put in something good and progressive and cute and wholesome.
I think it was more like series 3 or 4. That one. I
sworn it was earlier on.
It is quite early.
But yeah, then one of the producers was like, no. We can't be having this.
It's funny, because his daughter, what was her name again?
I can't think.
I can't remember, but when Data creates this new android, it's sort of like a sort of amorphous blob.
It's a blank slate.
Being. Yeah, and it's actually an actor who was in the gender switch episode.
Yeah.
He was one of the male servants on that female-dominated planet.
And they're allowed to choose. Data basically says, I will let my child choose their gender. Which is what more parents should do if your kid's not sure about their gender. Just support them. Let them explore. Let them figure out. They need you there to be their support. Because you are their parent, and there is no one at that age who they are going to trust and rely on more, and who could hurt them more with betrayal than their parent.
Data, because he is an android,
I love
and
Data.
it opens him up. It gives him certain vulnerabilities which other characters don't have. Yeah. We do meet very early on in the show his brother, Law, also played by Brent Spiner.
Villain.
Yeah,
Brent Spiner. Oh my god, I love him.
The episode where they meet their creator. And
also played by Brent Spiner.
Yeah, he's still doing it now in Picard, from what I've heard.
I love him. He's such a legend.
But yeah, that was impressive how they had 3 Brent Spiners on the screen at once.
Each one was completely distinct.
Yeah.
Personality-wise.
But you do have quite a few episodes where Data gets corrupted some way. Supporting character, Lieutenant Barclay. He's a complex one. He's played by Dwight M. Schutz from the A-Team. Yeah, first episode, he retreats into the holodeck to sort of live out fantasies to deal with his frustrations.
But the problem is he has his co-workers in there. And it's very inappropriate.
Yeah. And then later on he gets possessed by this entity and becomes like Brainiac and takes over the ship.
Oh, he's such a weird character.
He's great. The way they play him, he's great.
He's got a lot of layers to him, but my god, he's weird. Just don't let him near women.
We talked about in, Generation X, which was an X-Men thing, and we had Matt Frewer as the villain. And Matt Frewer actually shows up in an early TNG episode where he plays a supposed time traveller.
Yeah, he does too.
He's a bit more restrained there compared to other things.
It's not
Max Headroom, his actor.
Yeah, Max Headroom, who is very animated, which is funny because he's an AI.
Yeah. Another side character I like is Deanna's mother, who was played by Majel Barrett, who's actually the voice of the ship's computer, and she was in the original series.
I will say, her character always shut me off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. It's not that she's bad. Fantastic actress, and she chewed the hell out of every scene she was in. I think she just terrified me.
She's made to be annoying. I remember the episode opens and Picard slowly opens his door and peers out, and he starts out, and she just appears behind him.
I do love that, because Picard very rarely shows a break in emotion. He's always very serious, very stern. Soon as Lwaxana Troi shows up, he's just like, not again.
I like the episode where they get kidnapped by Ferengi.
Ferengis, yeah.
So Picard has to convince the Ferengi that he and Lwaxana are in a relationship.
So he quoting Shakespeare.
He does this great speech and convinces him. There's the episode with this is another heavy topic where it's an alien race and his scientist is working on this thing to save their sun, which is about to go supernova. And as he fails, he just sort of says, well, I guess it's now my time. And it's revealed that their culture, they euthanize their elderly when they reach the age of 60.
Yeah. And
it creates quite a bit of conflict when Lwaxana falls for him. And, God, it was heart-wrenching.
Yeah, that was a rough one. And this just shows... This is why... The tricky thing about different cultures and having different values, what seems barbaric to us is normal to others, and what seems normal to us is barbaric to them. That's the tricky part. This is why interacting with new cultures needs to be handled a lot better than it usually is.
It's an odd one because I think I'd heard it floated as some sort of weird eugenics experiment of to kill people at a certain age.
Yeah, it is very eugenicsy. I'm not a fan of eugenics.
No.
For instance,
I don't think many people...
I support euthanasia, but that's going to be voluntary.
Yeah. It's a different topic. It's
different, yeah. It's we kill them off at a certain point, but that's their choice. It should not just be mandated at this age you die.
Yeah. But by making it that way...
Is that just our cultural values talking?
It is.
And that's the tricky thing. Because we're raised with certain values, that's just what's normal to us.
I think that's what makes it so alien, is it is a concept that we're familiar with, but it is so alien because there's nothing really comparable to that in the real world.
No, thank God.
Because it's not like he's sick. It's just he's old, and they go, well, they don't even discuss like the reasons why. It's just this is what we do when we reach a certain age, and it's just get your living done before then, and that's we wave you off then.
I'm very glad that, as far as I know, no culture has that kind of thing, because I can't really justify that in my.
It does allow for an exploration of tricky topics like that, and
I think is good, because I think we can. Most people. There are some, what's that there, don't. Most people agree, eugenics are bad. Don't, no, not good. Very, very not good, bad.
Aliens, what do you think of the aliens of the series? Because, I mean, Klingons are now friendly, but they're still there to be...
yes, Star Trek aliens. The most amorphous part of the body is the forehead.
You do actually have an episode which is quite similar to Prometheus in a way, where you do meet an alien race who sort of are established as the progenitor of humans and Klingons and everything, really.
Which is interesting, I guess. That kind of, it's like mirroring that real world. It's like how basically every race of human originated in Africa.
Yeah.
At some point, way back along the lines, like hundreds of thousands of years ago. There's always a progenitor. We just branch out and adapt to certain environments.
I was being told about a theory that Bajorans and Cardassians are actually the same species because while like Vulcans and Klingons can mate with humans, you need like surgical interference to allow it to be possible. Yeah. So it's not like natural. But Cardassians and Bajorans can breed naturally, which suggests that they're the same species. And despite their appearance, I mean, Cardassians are like big sort of reptile men with holes on their foreheads, and Bajorans have like ridges over their bridge of their nose.
Crazy. DS9 is fantastic. You get a lot more about the Cardassians.
Haven't seen them yet.
Oh, DS9 is such a good series. You know, Chief, the teleport room guy.
O'Brien. Yep.
He is one of the main characters in DS9.
Oh, right.
And he is fantastic.
I'd heard that Worf was in it as well.
He is. They're also an important character. They're both just so good. I love that series. One of my favourite Star Trek series is DS9.
Oh, sweet.
So when you get around to watching that, we'll talk about that one too.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
But for now, we'll stick with TNG.
TNG, yes.
I will say two of my favourite episodes. I can't remember the names of the episodes, because obviously. My absolute favourite episode is Data's trial to prove he is sentient.
Yes.
Everything about that episode, I adore. I love the hard-hitting topics. I love how it's portrayed. I love having to see Riker's emotional complexity and conflict. I love seeing Data stand up and prove that, no, I might be a robot, but I am sentient. I am a being. I have every right to exist.
And that they took Tashiar's death and gave it a degree of meaning.
Yeah, they didn't just say, oh, we shagged once. No, they were close.
They were close friends.
Which proves that Data had genuine affection for Tasha. Affection, which is something only a living being can have.
And proving that he's alive, yeah.
And it's just such a good episode. And you get to see Picard defending him. And Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes, my God, their acting in this episode is fantastic. Yeah. They just go at it. And then you get to see, because Jonathan Frakes' William Riker was forced to be the prosecutor. He had to argue against Data, because he was ordered to, obviously, by Starfleet.
Yeah.
Even though William Riker likes Data. Data is his friend, his companion. They've been on the ship together, and he does not want Data to be disassembled. Because this whole thing is, this dude, Maddox, wants to disassemble Data and examine him to make more of him, but Data's like, don't. I'm alive, I'm sentient, I'm self-aware, do not kill me. And then Riker has to do it, and you could see the conflict the whole time, because Riker, he does his job properly.
Yeah, he does it professionally. It's like, I don't like you now, you're doing this too good.
You can definitely see because he knew that if he fudged it, if he faked it, they'd know. And they'd just throw the court case out, and then he had to fight hard otherwise, because if he didn't... Because this was set up, obviously, to make it so the dad would definitely fail. So he had to fight hard. Because if they could tell for 1 minute he wasn't actually taking this seriously, they would have just thrown the court case out and killed Data. And the end of the episode, he couldn't bring himself to celebrate with everybody else, because even though he knew what he had to do, he still hated himself for the fact he argued against someone he considered a friend. And I love that emotional complexity, and I loved seeing Data defending himself and showing... This whole thing for me also felt very like, as someone on the spectrum, this felt like he was talking about autism. This is probably just me projecting, but because obviously at Data doesn't feel emotions the same way the average person does not. It just felt like just because you're in the spectrum doesn't mean you're any less human. Doesn't mean you're worth less than anybody else. You still deserve life. You still deserve to be happy, to have a full, fulfilling life.
Agreed.
And I think that's why this episode resonates so well with me, because of my own mental issues. And Picard, oh my God, just seeing Picard go full on in defense of I love this episode.
Yeah.
It's such a good episode.
There's so many trial episodes of The Next Generation as well.
Oh, it is, because Next Generation's a lot less action-based, a lot more cerebral. Plenty of action still, but...
Yeah, and it's really... It still holds up. It's available to watch on Netflix in its entirety.
Still a fantastic watch, mostly.
Series 1 definitely pales in comparison to the rest.
We don't talk about the Africa planet in Season 1.
Yeah, that was a strange one.
That was a terrible episode.
That was a very strange one. But there's so much to it. I mean, 170-something episodes.
Oh, yeah. For the most part, it's all fantastic. It's just a few misses, and Season 1 was just... You can skip that.
Although I do think it does do necessary character building and needs to... The further establishment. It's not like they completely forget about it. They do remember all that character development and stuff, and it continues on.
Better depth in later season. And there are a lot of episodes you can just skip because you don't really get any depth. They're just there to be creepy and weird.
Yeah, I've heard some mixed things. Like Star Trek fans have said, it's very similar to TOS. So if you're familiar with that, go into that, and it sort of gradually builds into this new show. Yeah. Don't take Series 1 at face value. Sort of stick with it,
don't
or pick
let
a few
define your opinion of the
episodes.
entire series, because the rest of the series is vastly better.
There's still a few shaky episodes here and there.
Oh, yeah. And my other favourite episode, again, I can't remember the thing, it's when Picard is stranded on a planet with an alien, and this alien's race only speaks in metaphors.
Oh, yes.
Darmok Angela at Tanagra.
Yes.
I love this episode. I love the cultural and the language barrier. I love seeing Picard slowly figure out what this means, and then using our world, like using Gilgamesh and Anchises and all that. And it's just such a cool episode and such a cool concept.
It's a great episode at sort of showing the understanding of a language, even though they do use English with some, alien words thrown in. Yeah. And especially when the rest of the series is all like universal translators and everyone's speaking different languages, we can understand each other.
Because they speak exclusively in metaphors and stuff like that. The universal translator doesn't help. You know the words they're saying, but you can't understand the meaning. And it's just watching Picard figure it out, and his frustration, and then his happiness as he realised, and the closeness, the bond the two just develop through understanding each other's language. It's just such a good episode.
But yes, on that note...
I kind of hogged this whole episode, sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, TNG is massive, and there's so much to talk about.
And it is a series I'm very passionate about.
Barely spoken about John Delancey as Q.
We'll have to do more episodes.
Totally.
Definitely do some more TNG episodes, because there's too much to talk about.
There is a lot.
Because my God, Q is fantastic.
Anyway, this has been the Geeks Review talking about Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm Royce.
I'm Jacob.
See you next time.